The message arrived at 9:47 a.m., just as sunlight slipped through the blinds of my apartment and hit the stack of guidebooks on my table. Hawaii is canceled. Erica wrote the words. Neat, polite, detached. Mom said we can't afford it anymore. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred the air, suddenly too still. For a second, I thought it was a joke. 3 days earlier, I'd spent the last of my savings on matching swimsuits, snorkeling gear, and a silk sundress I didn't need but wanted for the family photos she promised we'd take. I was supposed to finally belong in one of those pictures. My father's second wife, Helen, had planned the trip, or so I'd believed. A chance for all of us to reconnect, she'd said, voice smooth as honey, but now the sweetness turned to something sour on my tongue. I called Erica immediately. She answered on the second ring, her tone rehearsed, soft, sympathetic. Hey, Lena? Yeah, I'm really sorry. Mom's been stressed. Dad's investments aren't doing great. Flights got too expensive. We'll do something closer next time. Her words were precise, the kind people use when they're lying but don't want to be caught. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. It's fine, I said, but my voice cracked on the last syllable. I hung up and sat still, the silence loud enough to sting. My walls felt thinner, the whole room pulsing with memories of every time they'd left me out, every dinner, every secret, every photo that didn't include me. The worst part wasn't missing the trip. It was realizing I'd been naive enough to believe I was ever invited for the right reasons. I picked up the open guidebook beside me, the page marked Road to Hana, and closed it carefully as if sealing something fragile. Through the window, the Arizona light looked harsher, cutting clean lines across my reflection. I whispered to no one. You canceled Hawaii, not me. My phone buzzed with the second notification, a group text from Helen, tickets refunded. Hope everyone's okay with the change. Everyone. Meaning them. I wasn't even part of the everyone. The sting behind my ribs deepened, quiet, precise, final. When I was 9, Helen married my father, and the word family was rewritten in ways no child should have to learn. She came with polished nails perfume that smelled like power and a daughter who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. Erica was 12, already perfect hair that behaved, grades that impressed, and a smile that landed like approval wherever she aimed it. From day one, she called my father Dad with effortless grace, while I, the real daughter, learned to fade at the edges. Helen didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her power lived in subtle corrections, in a tilt of the head, in the way she'd say, Lena, honey, maybe let Erica handle it. She's better with people. It sounded kind, but every word was a brick in a wall she was building between me and my father. By the time I turned 28, that wall felt permanent. I had my own apartment, a quiet job as a junior designer, and a lifetime subscription to being almost included. They called it love. I called it performance. The Hawaii trip had felt like a chance to rewrite that script. For the first time, Helen had sounded genuine on the phone. You work so hard, Lena. We'd love to have you join us this year. The words hit me like sunlight through frost, unexpected and dangerous. I'd said yes before she could change her mind. I remember the days leading up to the supposed trip. I'd driven to Target for sunscreen, to Macy's for swimwear, humming like someone preparing for peace. I imagined breakfasts on the balcony, my father smiling, maybe even saying he was proud of me. I pictured Helen laughing, Erica relaxed, the four of us finally looking like those families in travel brochures. But illusions are expensive, and I'd paid for mine in hope. Looking back now, I see the pattern with surgical clarity. Every invitation came with a condition, every compliment with a leash. Helen's control was invisible to outsiders, perfectly packaged manipulation. We're so lucky to have a family that gets along. She'd tell friends at her dinner parties while slipping subtle jabs across the table, Lena. Maybe next time wear something brighter, darling. You always look so serious. I'd smile, swallow the insult, and pretend it didn't sting. That's what good daughters do in houses ruled by appearances. On the night before the canceled trip, I'd stayed up folding clothes, playing ocean sounds on YouTube, letting myself believe this time would be different. It's strange how the body knows betrayal before the mind does. I'd woken the next morning uneasy, checking my phone before brushing my teeth. No new messages, no updates, just silence waiting to break. When Erica's text arrived hours later, my stomach already knew. Hawaii is canceled. The words weren't a surprise, they were confirmation. That afternoon, my father called. His voice was weary, distracted. You know how your stepmother gets anxious about budgets. She just wants peace. Peace. That was her favorite word. Peace when she'd frozen me out of conversations. Peace when she'd rewritten history to make herself the victim. Of course, I said. Tell her not to worry. When the call ended, I caught my reflection in the blank TV screen. I didn't look angry. I looked numb. The kind of numb that comes from a lifetime of trying to earn love from people who never intended to give it. I wrote one line in my notebook that night, pressing hard enough to dent the page. Next time I'll keep receipts. Erica called the next morning, her voice light as wind chimes. Hey, Lena, I just wanted to make sure you weren't upset. Mom feels awful. Her tone dripped with practiced empathy. I stared at the half-packed suitcase on my bedclothes, folded like questions with no answers. I'm fine, I said. Things happen. A lie, meeting another lie. She sighed, sounding relieved. You're such an understanding sister. The word sister felt like an echo of something that never existed. When the call ended, I sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the silence heavy between its clicks. At lunch, my father texted a single line. Helen's been anxious again. Try not to take it personally. I almost laughed. Anxious was the word he used when she locked him out of their joint account for forgetting to log dinner receipts when she threw plates because the maid mixed up the table settings when she made me apologize for creating tension. Anxious was her shield. My father had learned to live behind it. That night, I unzipped the suitcase, placing every item back into drawers like I was undoing evidence of hope. The smell of coconut sunscreen lingered mocking. I opened my notebook, the same one I'd used in college to sketch ideas, and wrote a single line. She lies beautifully. The ink bled slightly through the paper. Days passed with no contact. I buried myself in design drafts at work, pretending color palettes and typography could fill the hollow. But betrayal doesn't vanish. It ferments. Each night, I'd lie awake replaying details Erica's casual tone, Helen's silence, my father's avoidance. Gaslighting doesn't erase memory. It corrodes confidence. On Friday evening, my phone buzzed. A group photo notification, Helen's social feed tagged Family Night Blessed. The image loaded slowly on my weak Wi-Fi, my father, Helen, and Erica sitting at a restaurant lays around their necks. The caption had a hibiscus emoji. My throat tightened. I checked the timestamp. Posted 3 hours ago. Location, Maui, Hawaii. I refreshed twice just to be sure. More photos appeared Erica in a floral dress ocean behind her, Helen holding a drink, my father smiling stiffly. Beneath the images were comments. You all look amazing. What a beautiful family, I stared until my eyes burned. They hadn't just lied. They'd erased me from the story entirely. I called my father, straight to voicemail. I called again. On the third try, he answered, voice low, uneasy. Lena. Everything okay? You're in Hawaii, I said. A pause stretched long enough to hold the truth. Then, it wasn't my idea. Helen thought. He stopped. A woman's voice murmured in the background. Helen's. We'll talk when I'm back, sweetheart. Click. My hands shook. I opened my laptop and saved every screenshot, photos, comments, timestamps. Each file named with the precision of an archivist date-time lie. I wasn't crying. Not yet. The rage was too clean for tears. I emailed the files to myself, then printed them. The paper felt warm coming out of the printer like the proof was still alive. Sitting at my kitchen table, I arranged the photos in order, studying them like a detective at a crime scene. I could trace the sequence arrival dinner sunset drinks, the same itinerary we'd planned together. Even the boat company matched the brochure I'd sent weeks ago. The realization landed cold and surgical. They hadn't canceled my trip. They'd replaced me in it. I whispered, they took my seat. The words hung in the dim light. I folded the photos into a file labeled Ward Family Case 1. The mechanical act steadied me. This wasn't just hurt anymore. It was evidence. I poured a glass of water, my reflection fractured in the surface. Somewhere across the ocean, they were probably laughing over dessert. But the thing about laughter, it doesn't erase what's written down. I looked at the folder one last time before sliding it into the drawer. You canceled Hawaii, I murmured again, this time with something sharper under the calm, but you didn't cancel me. I didn't sleep that night. The blue light of my laptop cast long, cold shadows across the living room as I combed through Erica's profile. Every post was a confession wrapped in filters and hashtags. Best sunset ever, she wrote, standing barefoot in the same cove I had once pinned on our shared Pinterest board. Her caption shimmered with artificial warmth, the kind designed to hide guilt behind golden light. I scrolled further videos of Helen dancing with resort staff, my father clapping along, awkward but obedient. The comment section was full of friends praising their family vacation. The phrase made my stomach twist. When I tried calling again, my father didn't pick up. The next morning, I texted Helen directly. I hope the trip's going well. The photos look beautiful. Her reply arrived within minutes. What photos? The audacity was surgical. She was rewriting reality in real time. Someone must have tagged us incorrectly, she continued. We're home, Lena. Please don't start unnecessary drama. I stared at her words, the calmness of them. That was her mastery gaslighting, not through volume, but through poise. The more composed she sounded, the crazier you felt. I typed a response, deleted it. Instead, I took screenshots of the messages, labeled them chronologically, and saved them next to the photos. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, a steady, deliberate rhythm. Later that afternoon, a text came from Erica. Please don't tell Dad you saw those posts. Mom didn't want to hurt your feelings. I almost laughed. The hypocrisy was flawless. I typed back slowly. Don't worry, I'm not hurt. It was true in a strange way. Pain had already calcified into something colder, something sharper. That evening, I printed everything. Photos, messages, timestamps, and pinned them to a corkboard above my desk. It looked like a crime map, lines connecting lies to smiles, captions to betrayals. The evidence wasn't for the world yet. It was for me to remind myself I wasn't crazy, that what happened was real. I spent the next day in silence. My apartment felt like a safe house. I made tea, sat by the window, and wrote in my notebook. Step 1, gather facts. Step 2, never warn them. Every quiet act felt like resistance. At dusk, my phone buzzed, a voicemail from my father. Hey, sweetheart. We landed safely. Sorry for the misunderstanding. Let's talk soon. The words, misunderstanding and safely, echoed in my head. They weren't coming home from an accident. They were coming home from a betrayal. When I finally called him back, he sounded tired. Helen feels awful about the mix-up, he said. We'll make it up to you. How I asked? Another trip? Another lie. The silence that followed was raw, unedited. Then he whispered, You're overreacting. There it was, the family mantra. Every truth I'd ever spoken had been labeled overreaction. Okay, Dad, I said softly, if that's what you need to believe. After we hung up, I stood in front of the corkboard again. The photos no longer looked like memories. They looked like evidence in a deposition. That's when it clicked. My entire life with them had been a series of gaslit revisions. Every slight rewritten as my fault. Every silence reframed as peace. I poured myself another cup of tea, watching the steam curl upward, fragile but free. Betrayal had a strange way of sharpening vision. I could see the hierarchy now, Helen pulling strings, Erica echoing her cruelty, my father too afraid to cut the line. They thought I'd stay quiet like always, but silence, I realized, could be a weapon too. I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it, The Ward Family Project. Under it, I wrote, Objective Document Psychological and Financial Manipulation. Prepare for exposure. I hit save and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the night deepened over Arizona, still and merciless. Somewhere in Hawaii, waves crashed against the shore, erasing footprints. Here, in my small apartment, I was learning to leave my own permanent ones. The morning they returned, Helen called. Her voice was as calm as still water, the kind that hides something beneath. Lena, darling. She began, her tone sugar smooth. I heard you've been confused about some photos. You really shouldn't believe everything you see online. I sat by my window, sunlight pooling across the table stacked with printed screenshots. Confused, I said quietly. The resort tags your location automatically. That's not confusion. That's GPS. There was a pause, short measured. You always did have such a dramatic way of looking at things, Helen replied. We didn't tell you because you're so sensitive. You'd take it personally. The word sensitive hit harder than any insult. It wasn't meant to describe emotion, it was meant to erase it. That had always been Helen's talent, reframing cruelty as care. Mom just didn't want tension. Erica chimed in on speakerphone, her voice chirpy and false. You know how family energy can get weird. I could hear Helen inhale the subtle sound of control resetting. Let's not make a scene. We love you, Lena. It's time to move on. My fingers tightened around the phone. Move on from what I asked, from being excluded, or from pretending I wasn't. Silence stretched for a full 5 seconds, long enough to expose the fracture beneath their polished tone. Then Helen exhaled softly. You're overanalyzing again. Maybe talk to someone about that. Click. The line went dead. I sat still, the quiet ringing louder than the call itself. Gaslighting doesn't erase reality, it replaces it with a prettier lie. Helen had spent years painting those lies in pastels, convincing my father I was unstable, convincing Erica that cruelty was tradition. She never yelled, she suggested. She never denied, she clarified. And in the end, I was always the problem. That night, I recorded the entire voicemail onto a USB drive and labeled it Exhibit 4 Denial Pattern. Each word had weight now, not just memory, but proof. I typed my observations into the growing document pattern of manipulation: consistent, maintain composure, gather third-party confirmation. I began to remember other moments, the subtle humiliation at family dinners, the way Helen would interrupt my stories with a smile. Sweetheart, that's not quite how it happened. The way Erica laughed, then whispered later, Mom says you exaggerate because you feel invisible. They were right about one thing: I had felt invisible. But invisibility has its advantages. People reveal their truth when they think you've disappeared. Later that evening, I received a text from my father. Your stepmother feels terrible. Please don't dwell. The phrasing was familiar. Don't dwell, don't react, don't make trouble. Words used to pacify a child, not respect an adult. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my file, added a new line. They depend on my silence. It's time to make silence work for me. The next morning, I backed up every file, twice one on the cloud, one in a flash drive hidden behind a stack of design portfolios. I deleted the originals from my phone. My apartment was still the kind of stillness that precedes action. Through the glass, I watched sunlight strike the neighboring building, bright and clean. I whispered to myself, they can keep their version of peace. I'll build my own kind. For the first time in years, the word family didn't sound like home. It sounded like a verdict waiting to be written. I bought a new notebook the next day, hardbound charcoal gray, the kind lawyers use in court. The first page I titled The Ward File. My handwriting was steady, detached. Beneath it, I drew 3 columns: date, event, behavior. It looked clinical, like the start of a medical report, and in a way it was. The disease was manipulation. I was documenting the symptoms. I wrote everything I could remember from the past month: the canceled trip, the calls, the text messages, the lies. When I filled the first page, I added subcategories: financial, emotional, verbal. Each section bloomed with detail. Every word I wrote made the story less like trauma and more like testimony. That evening, I printed the call logs, every message from Helen and Erica, highlighting the discrepancies, times they claimed to be home while posting photos tagged in Maui. I stapled the evidence in order, labeling each piece with the precision of a case file. The stack grew heavy in my hands. I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical. I'd learned that in toxic families, anger was the emotion they used to discredit you. But evidence that was silent, undeniable, unflinching. I spent hours piecing together the timeline. March 3rd, invitation. March 10th, trip canceled. March 17th, first photo posted. March 18th, Helen denies trip. March 19th, voicemail claiming confusion. March 20th, emotional manipulation initiated. It read like a pattern of control, not coincidence. I underlined that word 3 times: control. While my printer hummed, I brewed tea and let memories rise like ghosts. Helen teaching me how to speak properly at 12, meaning how to make my voice smaller. Erica practicing tears in the mirror before confronting our father. My father telling me, "You know how they are. Just keep the peace." For years, I had mistaken survival for acceptance. But the truth was simpler. They thrived on my compliance. The folder I used was navy blue plain. On the cover, I wrote Ward Family Archive. Inside it went the photos, the call transcripts, even receipts for the Hawaii trip I had prepaid months before, non-refundable deposits for snorkeling hotel reservations that still bore my name. I added copies of my bank statements showing transfers to Helen Ward, small emergency loans she'd asked for over the years. Each transfer had come with promises. "We'll pay you back when we can." None had been repaid. I sat back in my chair, flipping through the documents. They told a story more honest than any of us ever had. Every page was an accusation wrapped in politeness. Helen's emails full of passive-aggressive gratitude, Erica's cheerful manipulation, my father's weak apologies. Together, they formed a perfect pattern of quiet abuse. The more I read, the more I understood this wasn't just about Hawaii. It was about inheritance control and power. Helen had been managing my father's estate for years, quietly transferring ownership of small assets, closing old accounts, keeping me uninformed. Erica was her mirror beautiful, compliant, deceitful. They believed silence equaled ignorance. They were wrong. By midnight, my living room looked like an investigator's office. Papers, binders, color-coded tabs. I labeled a second folder Future Action. Inside it, I slipped the contact card of a lawyer I found online, David Chin, specializing in estate and fiduciary abuse. I wasn't ready to call him yet, but the name felt like a loaded weapon waiting on the table. I poured another cup of tea and opened my notebook again, writing across the top of a new page, "Objective: to regain agency through documentation." My handwriting had changed firmer, more deliberate. I caught my reflection in the window eyes, steady posture upright. The girl who'd waited for permission to be loved was gone. In her place was someone calculating truth in real time. At 2 a.m., I closed the notebook and exhaled slowly. The evidence didn't make me feel vindicated. It made me feel prepared. There's a moment between awakening and action, a silence thick with potential. That's where I lived now. I turned off the light and whispered into the darkness. They built their empire on lies. I'll dismantle it with paper. The invitation came on a Thursday, wrapped in casual friendliness that almost hid its intent. Erica called first, her voice bright and controlled. "Hey, we're having dinner Saturday. Mom's idea. Dad wants everyone together again. You should come. We can start fresh." I heard the words "start fresh" and felt the familiar sting of manipulation disguised as mercy. Still, I agreed. You can't expose a pattern from the outside. Sometimes you have to walk back into the theater and let the actors perform. Saturday night, Helen's house smelled like citrus cleaner and control. The dining room shimmered under too much light. My father sat at the head of the table, already nervous, twisting his napkin like he was waiting for permission to breathe. Helen greeted me with air kisses. "You look tired, dear. Work must be overwhelming." Erica poured wine into my glass before I could answer. "We just want peace," Helen said, smiling in a way that dared me to ruin it. The first course came with silence. Then Helen leaned forward. "Lena, sweetheart, about those photos you misunderstood." I cut her off gently. "I didn't misunderstand anything." Her smile didn't falter, but her knuckles tightened around her fork. "Let's not be dramatic," she said. "It was just easier this way." "You're so emotional sometimes." I met her gaze calm and steady. Emotional isn't the same as blind. Erica intervened, her tone falsely light. "Actually, we wanted to tell you something exciting." She glanced at Helen, then at my father. "We're starting a small business and online wellness retreat. It's about empowerment and healing." I waited for the hook. "Dad might help us invest," she added carefully. Helen placed her hand over my father's. "Just a family project, something to unite us." I looked at the three of them, the perfect triangle of deceit. "What kind of investment?" I asked. Helen's answer was too smooth. "Just a little seed money, 50,000 maybe, nothing major." The number landed like a dare. My father avoided my eyes. "You should consider it," he murmured. "Erica has great ideas." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure she does." They mistook my composure for compliance. We'll send you the proposal, Erica said. It's not just business, it's about trust. Her tone lingered on the word trust like it was a test I'd already failed. After dinner, I excused myself, walked to the bathroom, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked calm, but inside, the decision had already formed. They were about to ask for money from the same account Helen had once borrowed from the same account she'd used to pay for Hawaii. I thought about my folder at home, every screenshot, every lie. When I returned to the table, Helen was laughing softly, her hand brushing my father's sleeve. Erica refilled glasses, pretending we were whole. I stood by my chair and smiled. Thank you for dinner, I said. I'll review the proposal when you send it. Helen tilted her head. So you'll help, I said I'd review it. I replied evenly. Their eyes flickered first surprise, then suspicion. I saw it then clearly they weren't inviting me back into the family. They were inviting me back into control. I gathered my coat, leaned close to my father, and said quietly, Be careful what you invest in. When I walked out into the cool night, the air tasted clean electric. That dinner had been their test. They didn't know it yet, but it had become mine. I drove home in silence, headlights carving through the dark. Back at my apartment, I opened my folder and slid in a new page labeled Phase 2. Under it, I wrote, They think I'm the mark. They're wrong. I reread the notes from that dinner the next morning, line by line, until the pattern revealed itself like a watermark under heat. They were moving from emotional manipulation to financial exploitation. Helen's control had always been about power, but money that was her true language. I opened my laptop and searched for the lawyer whose card I'd tucked away weeks earlier. David Chin, Estate and Fiduciary Law. I called his office before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the third ring, his tone measured professional. Chin Law. How can I help you? I need advice about a family situation, I said. Potential misuse of funds, psychological coercion. I don't want to press charges yet. I just need to know what's legal. Bring me documents, he said simply. We start with facts, not feelings. That sentence became my mantra. That afternoon, I gathered every statement, transfer email, and receipt. The pile grew like sediment, years of small betrayals forming a solid layer of truth. I discovered something new. A $7,200 withdrawal from my father's retirement account made the same week they booked the Maui trip. The notation on the transfer read, Family Travel. The signature wasn't my father's. I compared it to his old business forms. The slant was wrong. Helen had signed for him. I printed it and slipped it into a plastic sleeve marked Forgery Preliminary. In the quiet of my apartment, I worked like an investigator. Coffee went cold beside me. Outside, cars hummed down the street, unaware that a daughter was building her case against her own family. The documents formed a pattern too precise to ignore joint accounts opened under both Helen and Erica's names. Small gifts marked as family expenses, even the down payment for Erica's new car linked to my father's business fund. Every transaction wore a disguise. I labeled everything meticulously Hawaii Scheme Phase 1, Investment Fraud Phase 2. By midnight, I had a binder thick enough to be a spine. The next morning, I met David Chin in a modest downtown office, its walls lined with framed degrees and muted landscapes. He shook my hand, firmly studied the folder I placed on his desk. You've done half my job already, he said. You're organized. That's good. He flipped through the pages, quickly scanning notes, pausing at highlighted sections. They've built a system around dependency, psychological abuse backed by financial manipulation. You're right to document this. I exhaled slowly, surprised at the relief in my chest. What can I do to protect what's left? He explained it in clean, simple terms. Create separation, secure your assets. If there's joint ownership, remove your name, redirect your mail, change passwords. Legally, you can freeze access if you suspect fraud. By the time I left his office, the sky had turned pale and colorless, the city humming with mid-morning routine. I felt invisible walking through the crowd, and for once, invisibility worked in my favor. I opened a new account at a different bank that afternoon, transferred every cent I could. Then I called my HR department to redirect my paycheck. That night, I returned home and backed up everything on an encrypted drive. The sound of the uploading files was rhythmic, hypnotic. I realized I wasn't just protecting money. I was reclaiming autonomy. I thought of Helen's voice, smooth and dismissive. You're too emotional to handle finances. I smiled faintly. Emotion hadn't built this defense, logic had. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, control reclaimed, assets protected, evidence secured. Next step, wait for the ask. Because in families like mine, the ask always comes. It came sooner than I expected. 3 days after the lawyer meeting, my phone lit up with Erica's name. "Hey sis, just wanted to follow up about our little business idea." Her voice was syrupy practiced. "Mom and I put together a presentation. We'd love to show you." Tonight, I stared at the glowing screen, the timing perfect too perfect. "Sure," I said. "Come by at 7. When the doorbell rang, I had already set the scene. Coffee-ready documents, hidden phone recording quietly from the counter. Erica entered first, carrying a folder and wearing the same pastel smile she used for Instagram stories. Helen followed perfume-sharp posture regal. "You look lovely, Lena," she said, scanning the apartment like a realtor judging square footage. "Still living here? You should really think about buying." We sat at the dining table. Erica opened the folder, pulling out charts and printouts. So she began. "This is the wellness retreat concept. We'd use Dad's property as collateral for a small business loan, but we'd need about $50,000 in seed capital to start." She glanced up, eyes glimmering with false confidence. Helen placed a manicured hand on her shoulder. "It's a family opportunity, dear. We'd all benefit." The trap was elegantly built, appeal to emotion, wrap it in ambition, disguise it as unity. I kept my voice calm. "Who manages the funds?" Helen smiled. "Well, I've done most of the paperwork. It's easier that way." "Whose name is on the business license?" I asked. Erica hesitated. "Mom's for now, just to simplify tax stuff. And Dad's—" Helen's smile didn't falter, but her pupils tightened. "He's aware," she said. "He supports us completely." I took a slow sip of coffee. "That's interesting," I said softly, because the last withdrawal from his retirement account was signed by you, not him. The silence that followed was surgical. Erica's eyes flicked to Helen's panic slipping through her practiced calm. Helen recovered first. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharp now. "That's a serious accusation." I slid a printed copy of the transaction across the table. "March 12th, $7, $200. The handwriting doesn't match his. The signature angle's different by 9 degrees. I confirmed it with a legal expert." Helen's lips parted, but no sound came out. Erica shifted in her seat, whispering, "Mom, you went through our finances," Helen hissed, finally dropping the performance. "I went through mine," I said evenly. "You've used my name on joint accounts since I was 21. I just never looked closely enough before." The silence stretched again, heavy and electric. Then Helen exhaled slowly, regaining her mask. "You're overreacting as usual." "Families share." "It's what we do." "No," I said. "You take. That's what you do." She stood gathering the papers with trembling hands. "We came here in good faith, Lena." "I think you need help." "Already got it," I replied, glancing at my phone where the red light blinked faintly. "From a lawyer." Erica went pale. "You recorded this?" "Yes," I said. "It's called documentation." Helen's voice dropped to a hiss. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "I do," I said quietly. "And now, so will the court." She froze for a second, just one, but it was enough. I saw the realization cross her face. The controls she'd built over decades had cracked. They left quickly, slamming the door on their way out. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, expensive cold, fading. I turned off the recorder, saved the file, and whispered the name of the folder aloud as I stored it the day they slipped. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt sovereign. The email from David Chin arrived the next morning at 9:12 a.m. sharp. "Received your recording and documents. Very strong evidence. I recommend formal notice to protect yourself from retaliation. Please call when ready." I called immediately. His tone was calm but precise. "What you have isn't just emotional abuse, Lena. It's financial fraud, forgery, and coercion. We can either go to the police or file a civil claim first. If they attempt contact, direct it through me." I hesitated. "I don't want to destroy my family," I said. "You're not destroying them," he replied. "You're ending their control." By noon, my phone started buzzing. 5 missed calls from my father, 2 from Helen. One from an unknown number that left a voicemail, Erica's trembling voice, sugar turned to acid. "How dare you involve a lawyer?" Lena Mom's furious. "You're ruining everything. Dad's upset. He's sick over this. You have no idea what you've started." But I did. I'd started justice. That evening, Chin and I met again. His office felt smaller this time, the air dense with anticipation. He reviewed the documents line by line, his pen tapping against the table in a slow rhythm. "We'll draft a protective declaration," he said. "It states that you've been subjected to emotional manipulation, financial misuse, and coercion under false pretenses. We'll also file to audit your father's accounts. It forces transparency. Will my father have to testify? Not yet. But the audit will expose everything Helen's done." He looked at me, then his voice lowering. "You've been patient for years. This is the part where patience turns into action." The next morning, the paperwork was filed. Legal language carved my pain into clean paragraphs, pattern of deceit. Documented psychological abuse. Unauthorized withdrawal of retirement funds. False representation of financial consent. Words stripped of emotion but full of consequence. The first letter arrived at Helen's house 2 days later. She called within hours. "You unbelievable little ingrate," she hissed the moment I answered. "You think you can threaten us with paperwork? You think anyone will believe your little fantasy? Evidence doesn't need belief," I said. "It just needs to exist." Her breath hitched sharp and furious. "Your father won't stand for this. You're breaking his heart. He's been living with a broken compass for years," I said quietly. "I'm just showing him which direction north actually is." When I hung up, I felt nothing. Not triumph, not fear, just clarity. I forwarded her voicemail to Chin. He replied within minutes, "Excellent. That's intimidation on record. Keep everything." Days blurred into a rhythm of precision. Legal forms, bank statements, forensic handwriting reports. Each new document was a blade sharpened on truth. And then came the call from my father. His voice was softer than I remembered, tremulous. "Helen says you're suing us," he whispered. "Is this true? I'm suing her," I said gently. "Not you. She's my wife." "I know. That's why she's using your name on withdrawals." He went silent. For a long time, I heard nothing but his breathing. "Then I didn't sign those forms, Lena." "I swear. I know I said, and I can prove it." The words seemed to break something in him, a dam I'd never seen. "Your mother used to say you had her stubbornness," he said finally. Turns out that's the only honest thing Helen ever agreed with. When the case moved forward, Helen's mask cracked in public. Her attorney tried to dismiss the claim, calling it a misunderstanding among relatives. But Chin submitted the recording the moment she'd denied the signature, the moment she'd said families share. The judge's expression didn't change, but the gavel hit harder than sound. Preliminary hearing approved. Financial audit ordered. I sat there in the courtroom, silent, composed. Across from me, Helen's poise was gone. Her lipstick had bled at the corners. Erica sat beside her eyes, red biting her thumbnail. Afterward in the hallway, Helen stopped me. "You've embarrassed us," she spat. "No," I said. "You did that yourself." Then I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Some victories don't come with applause, only peace. That night, I went home and opened my notebook to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "The truth doesn't shout. It stands." The audit took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of silence broken only by official emails, court notifications, and the occasional call from David Chin updating me with surgical precision. I learned that exposure has a strange rhythm. It doesn't explode. It erodes. Piece by piece, Helen's empire began to crumble. The first discovery came from the bank, over $84,000 in family withdrawals, all authorized with forged signatures, most dated within the last 3 years. Each one traced back to a shared account managed under her maiden name, a detail she thought no one would notice. Then came the property records. A secondary mortgage on my father's home, filed without his knowledge, had funded Erica's wellness brand. Helen had used his retirement trust as collateral. It wasn't just fraud, it was betrayal carved into paperwork. Chin forwarded me the report, the subject line simple. "It's worse than expected." I printed every page, laid them across my dining table, each one glowing under lamplight like evidence in a crime drama. But this wasn't fiction. This was my family dissected in ink. When I told my father, his voice cracked. She said it was temporary, he whispered. She said it was for us. He sounded small, a man, stripped of narrative. I didn't see it, Lena. I should have. You couldn't, I said softly. She trained us not to see. He started crying. Then, not loudly, but in the quiet way men cry when they've realized the world they built their faith on is gone. I didn't interrupt. Some pain needs to echo before it releases. A week later, Helen filed for mediation. It was her attempt to reclaim control. No need for courts, her lawyer wrote. A private family resolution is best. I agreed, but only under Chen's terms. Every meeting recorded, every statement transcribed. The mediation took place in a neutral downtown office, glass walls, white chairs, no hiding places. Helen walked in first, her confidence dimmed but not gone. She wore gray, the color of deflection. Erica followed, smaller, somehow makeup faded. My father came last, his hands trembling slightly. Helen began with her performance. "This family doesn't need war," she said, voice trembling just enough to sound human. "We need compassion. We made mistakes, but suing your stepmother won't heal them." Chen leaned forward. "Mrs. Ward, compassion doesn't erase forgery." The mediator tried to redirect. "Let's focus on restitution," she said gently. But Helen couldn't help herself. "Lena has always misunderstood things." She twists narratives, I interrupted, calm but sharp. "You stole from Dad." "I protected him," Helen snapped, "by taking his home." Her mask slipped then for just a second. "That house would have been yours one day. You should be grateful I managed it." Erica flinched beside her. "Mom, please." Helen ignored her. "You've always wanted to be the victim, Lena. Congratulations, now you are." The mediator's pen stopped moving. Chen slid a document across the table. "This," he said, "is a notarized statement from the bank confirming her unauthorized access." Helen stared at it, then at me. For the first time in my life, she didn't look powerful. She looked frightened. "You'd destroy your family over money." "No," I said. "I'd destroy your lies over justice." When the meeting ended, Helen refused to sign the settlement. Erica followed her out in tears. My father stayed behind, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "I don't know how to fix this," he said quietly. "You don't," I told him. "You start over." 2 weeks later, the final ruling came. The court froze Helen's accounts, ordered restitution to my father, and referred the forgery to the county prosecutor. Erica's business was dissolved, her accounts audited. Chen called that evening. "You've done something most clients can't," he said. "You won without screaming." After the call, I sat on my balcony under a sky bleeding gold into violet. The city below buzzed like it always had, indifferent but alive. I thought about Helen probably pacing her perfect kitchen, calculating new excuses. I thought about Erica realizing that loyalty built on lies was just dependency in disguise. Then I thought about myself, not as the outcast, not the emotional one, but as the quiet witness who finally turned truth into armor. In my journal, I wrote a single sentence across a clean white page: "Gaslighting ends when the light belongs to you." It happened on a Thursday morning, quiet, clear, unremarkable. The kind of day that pretends nothing is coming. I was at my kitchen table sipping coffee when my phone vibrated with a news alert. "Local woman charged in financial misuse of elder's estate." The article didn't name her outright, but I didn't need it to. The photo beside the headline, "Helen Ward stepping out of a courthouse, sunglasses shielding a face that no longer looked like authority," told me everything. She'd been indicted on 3 counts: financial exploitation, falsifying legal documents, and unauthorized use of funds. The court had frozen what remained of her assets. Chen's email came seconds later. "It's official. Full restitution order in progress. You did it." I didn't reply right away. Justice doesn't feel like victory. It feels like silence after years of noise. Later that afternoon, my father called. His voice was quiet, fragile, but lighter somehow. "She's gone," he said. "Packed a suitcase this morning before the news broke. Erica's with her. They won't be coming back." "What about the house?" I asked. "It's safe," he said. The court transferred the title back to me. Then, after a pause, softer, "To us." For the first time in a long time, I heard his voice without Helen's echo inside it. That weekend, I went to his house, my childhood home. It felt smaller but cleaner, the air less suffocating. The pictures Helen had curated her smiling with Erica at charity events, her trophies of social superiority, were gone. My father stood by the kitchen counter holding a photo of me at 17, awkward and earnest, braces glinting. She always said this picture didn't fit the aesthetic, he murmured. I found it in the back of a drawer. I took it from his hand and smiled faintly. It does now. He looked older, but not defeated. What do we do now? He asked. We live, I said simply, without them telling us how. In the following months, restitution came in fragments, frozen, accounts liquidated, properties reclaimed. Helen avoided jail time through a plea deal, but her reputation was gone. Erica's business dissolved completely. The influencers who once called her visionary quietly unfollowed. I didn't gloat, I didn't post. Justice didn't need witnesses, it only needed weight. I focused on rebuilding my life. Therapy twice a week. Walks at dawn. I learned to cook again, not the performative dinners Helen used to host, but quiet meals for one. Sometimes my father joined me. He was learning too how to exist without someone narrating his worth. One night, months later, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a single document, a notarized amendment to his estate. I've named you executor, he said. Everything's transparent. You'll never have to fight for what's already yours. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Thank you, I whispered. Not for the inheritance, for finally seeing me. That night, after he left, I sat on the porch and opened my notebook one last time. Across the final page, I wrote, "Truth doesn't punish, it restores." Then I closed it. A few weeks later, I received a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a single handwritten note. "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're proud." It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting, Helen's perfect loops, her elegant venom. I folded it once, slid it into a folder labeled "Closure," and locked it in a drawer. Some ghosts don't deserve exorcism, they deserve filing. In early autumn, I booked a flight not to Hawaii, but to somewhere quieter, Oregon. A small coastal town where fog drapes over cliffs and the sea hums like forgiveness. On my first morning there, I stood on the rocks and watched the tide roll in. The air was cold and wild. I thought of all the years I'd been told to shrink to be polite, composed, invisible. I thought of every moment I'd swallowed truth to keep the peace. And then I let it all go. Behind me, a stranger asked, "First time here?" "Yes," I said. "But it feels like a return." He smiled politely and walked away. I stayed a while longer watching the horizon, the waves breaking and rebuilding again and again, relentless, patient, unbothered. Before I left, I reached into my bag and pulled out one last thing, the small photo of 17-year-old me that my father had saved. I placed it on the rocks, let the wind take it, watched it flutter once before disappearing into the sea. It wasn't grief I felt then, it was grace. Back home, I framed a single sentence from Chin's final letter. "The case is closed. The law worked as it should. It hung above my desk where my evidence board used to be. Now, every morning when sunlight hits that frame, I remember what it took to get there and what it means to be free without needing to be forgiven. Because survival is one thing, reclamation is another, and justice, real justice, isn't loud. It's the quiet you earn when the storm finally ends."